Welcome to the D-Spot podcast. Dr. Dana McNeil is a licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in working with couples using the Gottman method. Her evidence-based practice provides support for the wide range of relationship issues that modern couples face. By using her open, affirming, and outside-of-the-box thinking, Dr. Dana is able to approach her work with couples by bringing both insights and tools that reflect the realities of today's complicated relationships. Dr. Dana features guests on her podcast that include a unique array of celebrities, CEOs, influencers, and everyday folks who are all working on navigating new conversations about how society views what goes into a successful relationship. And now, here's your host, Dr. Dana McNeil.
Hello, I am Dr. Dana McNeil. This is the D-Spot podcast. This is everything about relationships, and I am extremely excited to introduce you to Dr. Heather Gunsaullus. And I love that she told me how to say it because it's not written like that.
Jennifer Gunsaullus.
Jennifer Gunsaullus, because it's not written like that. So I love that you gave me a pronunciation. Yes. So Jennifer is a sociologist. She's an international intimacy speaker and a relationship and communication coach. She is also the author of an amazing book that I checked out, From Madness to Mindfulness, Reinventing Sex for Women. Dr. Jenn has presented 2 TEDx Talks, good for you, co-hosts the podcast Sex Talks with Clint and the Doc, and it has over 1.7 million views on her In the Den with Dr. Jenn YouTube series. Dr. Jenn lives in San Diego, my hometown, hi neighbor, where she strums her ukulele, is an active women's philanthropist, and an avid beach volleyball player. Hello, Jenn.
So hello, nice Dana. I know. Nice to meet a neighbor here.
So I totally fangirl stalked you. And I have to tell you, I looked at Amazon and you had the sweetest video of you unboxing your, that would make Brene Brown so proud of you because it was so vulnerable and so sweet. You were clearly excited to have this representation of something that is been some life's work, and it shows how much you care about the topic.
Yeah, just so for listeners know, this was 3 years ago, actually, July 3 years ago, in 2019, when I got from my publisher my book. It was going to be published the next month, and I got it. Oh gosh, I can feel myself tearing up right now thinking about it. I held my book in my hands for the first time. They sent a box of 20 books, and I recorded myself unboxing it, and I just started crying, and I'm all my baby. And it was an amazing moment. It was really neat. Yeah.
And good for you writing a book. That's awesome. And I want to talk about that book. So as I was looking around, I found some blurbs, and I think a nice way to introduce this book is there are some quotes. So I wanted to read them because I think this will get everybody's attention. So here's the ways that if you agree or disagree with these statements, that you maybe want to read her book, which you should read it even if you don't identify. But I learned about the mechanics of female sexual pleasure in my sex ed class. I'm able to have a difficult conversation with my partner about our relationship. Said nobody ever. I can boldly and openly carry a tampon to the restroom in public, and I am totally comfortable being naked in front of a new partner. That would be every single person should read your book.
I know. Well, yeah. And at the heart of my work is how vulnerable sex is. Yeah. It is, emotionally, physically, mentally, socially, it's so vulnerable. And that is at the heart of a real depth of true intimacy and connecting with someone else. But it's terrifying because we could be judged, and we could be stigmatized, and we could be shamed. And most of us already carry some versions of those around sex, around relationships, emotions, or our bodies, just from the society that we grew up in, or our family, or our religion, or media messages. So it's I forgot my publisher wrote up those questions, and I was like, oh, that's good. That's true.
Your publisher did a good job.
If you are good with all of these things, you do not need my book.
If you're good with all of those things, come run my practice for me, because I need to learn something from you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because even as a therapist, we still struggle with that stuff.
I know. Yeah, I was actually on a date last night with a guy. And
tell us the details.
I know. I've got to be. I always promise them. I was like, listen, because I feel bad for men that go on dates with me. I was like, I promise you're not going to become fodder in my blogs and in my podcast interviews. But here I am talking about it. But I'm gonna. It was just that I was talking about something, and I was like, did that make you uncomfortable? I go, I get people don't normally talk about things like this. And he's like, yeah, I kind of did. I'm just not used to it. He goes, I'm not judging you. I'm just not used to it. And I was like, I get it. And then later on, he circled back just again about how kind of awkward these conversations are. And I go, you know what? I talk about sex all the time. I work hard to practice what I preach. This shit is still awkward for me at times because we're not used to doing it, and it's just so raw. Like, you know, you let all of your barriers down to really show up and be present and let someone see you and all your raw beauty and messiness as a human. And that will always feel vulnerable for us. So,
because what if we're rejected? What if the person's like, what's wrong with you? Or, you know, we're going to get in our heads about asking that question. Just, it's any kind of vulnerability opens us. But this one has got so much social stigma and so many social messages. So tell us about those societal messages that we receive about women and sexuality. What are we taking in?
So my specialty area as a sociologist is particularly like females that were assigned female at birth and then raised as little girls with all of those messages, and then as adults identify as women. And like that continuity of messages of quote unquote what it means to be a girl and what it means to be a woman. Like there's a lot of heaviness around that, of everything from, first of all, I mean, from a very young age, and this is changing some, but still, like, girls learn that their value is in their appearance, in being cute to others, and then also in being sweet and being nice. And the thing is, that's a great trait. However, for many women, they lose their voice in that. Because they're taught to stuff it down. Like, you shouldn't rock the boat. You need to put the needs of others first. You need to sacrifice. You need to be good. You need to be nice. You need to follow the rules. And again, like, there's aspects of these that are great when they're balanced with knowing yourself, honoring yourself, loving yourself. And we don't get those messages. So, and then you put it on top of, like, there's so much, especially religious, in many religions, shame around women and feeling sexual desire or feeling sexual pleasure. So much stigma around masturbation. You know, young women never learning about, like, we don't learn about our bodies and our anatomy and about pleasure. And so we don't know, like, even about our own, clitoris and how to experience orgasm or masturbation. So there's just so much around that. And then, I do think because we're not good at talking about these things, and because men are socialized very differently than women, then you end up with a lot of unwitting coercive situations in sexual encounters. And many young women have experienced that and then blame themselves. So, and then there's also, for some young women, this aspect of just learning that sex is dirty or that it's wrong. And then they're supposed to be an adult and get married and suddenly flip a switch and be like, I'm this open, amazingly sexually expressed, comfortable sexual being, which is impossible because our brains, you don't wire a brain in a certain way and then flip a switch and wire it somewhere else, especially not around these deep-seated topics around worth and connection, and as they, and around feelings of shame and embarrassment. So we all carry that. Most of us carry some versions of that, and then shame around our bodies that it's not perfect enough. And then we come into adulthood and then we're like, think that we're broken or that there's something wrong with us, instead of realizing, no, literally we are a product of our society. And we are all in the same boat in one way or another, trying to do the best we can. That's the basic premise of my book, the foundational aspect of, like, you are totally normal. And I go through, like, different interesting research studies, like this and this and this. All of these things are normal. It's not just you. Give yourself a break, pat yourself on the back for being here. And now how do we move forward through this? So,
especially if we're not having conversations about it, there is no way to get that validation or normalize it, right? So it's not like, I might go to one of my girlfriends, your hair looks good, you got extensions in there, how do I get that hair, right? We're not coming and having, like, I'm feeling all this guilt and shame about sex, I'm supposed to, like, be a lady in the bedroom, and, like, all that, those messages that. So we are also not having any outlets to have confirmation that this is normal for us to feel, because we're so quiet.
Well, and it's like you mentioned Brene Brown earlier, and I love her work around shame and vulnerability. And she mentions that, like, shame makes us want to, like, stick our heads in the sand. Like, we want to hide out and we don't want to talk to others, but then that's where it festers. It festers in the shadows like that. And so it takes so much courage to choose at least just one person who feels safe enough to you, that can honor you and witness you in your shame. And often the amazing thing is often once we've shared it with somebody and somebody, especially somebody who's trusted, all of a sudden we don't feel the heaviness in the same way. And because then the other person is like, I still love you. This doesn't change at all how I view you. And we're like, oh shit. Okay. So, but right, it doesn't live as strongly when you bring it out into the light and communicate it to others. But that takes a lot of courage.
So if I'm a female and I've identified that I want to start having these conversations with my partner, right? What's the approach? Is there like some mental inside work I have to do first?
Yeah.
To put on my big girl pants, and then like, how do I progress?
Yeah. So, the place I always start, and this is, me coming in as a sociologist, is just doing some journaling, even just 20 minutes of sitting down with a journal and answering questions like, when did I first hear about sex? When did I first see any sexual images? When was my first experiences? When did I first masturbate? And what were the messages you learned about this or thought about this? Did they feel positive? Did they feel negative? Did they feel neutral? Shining a bright light on that these you inherited these stories and these experiences from society, and then shining a bright light on it and looking at it through the lens of oh, this is a story. This isn't necessarily truth with a capital T, because this has interpretation in it, which then means you spend some time reflecting on those questions. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, I could write a new story now then for myself. That awful thing happened when I was 12, but I'm 32 now.
Yeah.
And I do have a voice. And
it's like if I got handed down that we always vote a certain party growing up in my family of origin, here's grandma's spaghetti recipe and we always serve this on Sunday night. Right. Now you're 35 and you're like, do I have to be a Republican because my parents said I was?
Right. Or you're like, I don't actually really love this spaghetti recipe. Or
so
I'm gluten intolerant now.
I don't love that I can't talk about sex. I don't love that I don't own my body. I don't love that I'm afraid to take a mirror and look at what's going on downstairs.
Yeah. So those are the places to start. And honestly, if you have a close girlfriend or sister or something like that, and then you both do this activity and then you come and read it to each other, that would be amazing, because that is, so, at the heart of my work with applied mindfulness and mindful intimacy is that we learn how to gain comfort with discomfort. So we all have discomfort around this, and that discomfort makes us want to avoid it. It makes us lash out at people that bring up topics we don't want to talk about. It makes us brush it under the rug. It makes us want to numb ourselves through alcohol or smoking pot or scrolling social media feeds or Netflix or some housework, whatever, something that we distract ourselves or with work. And mindfulness is learning to notice oh yeah, I'm uncomfortable. And oh, I totally want to run. Let me sit with this discomfort. And literally, I walk people through a process of where do you feel it inside of you? Is it in your belly? Is it in your solar plexus? Is it in your chest? You feel it up in your throat? Because that stuff lives in us. And because it's so uncomfortable at a visceral level, most of us learned a long time ago to do something to get rid of that feeling. And we don't even realize it. And then that is a quick trigger. And then we're off to a pattern. So even if you can learn to sit with that discomfort for 5 seconds, you're starting to rewire your brain. And so to be able to do a practice like that with a trusted friend, where you're reading it out loud and feeling uncomfortable and breathing through it, that is how you build comfort with discomfort. And that's what emotional resilience is. It's feeling things and then gaining skills and strength around that.
Beautiful. Love that. So I got mindful. I learned how to tolerate. I shared it with a girlfriend.
Well, it is a lifelong process.
I'm just
definitely not a check the box. I wish so.
I feel more comfortable. How do I know that I'm ready to share those conversations with my partner? I'll just not feel the tightness in my chest. I won't want to go.
You got to kind of plow through it and just trust. Honestly, I say, it is right. There's a fake it till you make it. But part of it is first of all, you've got to be with a partner that you do trust enough. That's a whole nother thing. If you're a partner that you don't trust being vulnerable with, or that you can really be raw with, that you're not going to be judged or it's not going to be used against you, that's a whole nother. But presuming you're with a partner who you both love and respect each other, you just don't have skills and comfort in doing this. The first thing to say is hey, can we I know we've got some friction in this area, and can we just talk for 10 minutes? I'm trying to do something different here. I'm not good at this. It's really uncomfortable. So can I just share something with you that I wrote? Because I'm trying to figure out why I'm so uncomfortable with these topics. And then even say, especially like if you have a male partner, often men are like, well, what's my role in this? What am I supposed to do with this? How do I
solve this problem?
Right, exactly. And so to be able to say there's literally nothing for you to do right now. This is part of my process of gaining comfort, and say, you bring up these topics and I shut them down and I'm sorry. I'm trying to learn how to be able to talk about these things. This is my first step. So yeah, and then
I
share
love
it.
that.
Yeah.
You're using all those therapeutic tools, right? This is how I feel when this behavior happens. This is what's my responsibility in it. Here's the part where I'm not getting defensive and I'm not attacking you and saying you're not creating a good space for me.
Yeah.
I'm owning that we both have a situation that we've co-created.
Yeah. And that you're trying to do something different. And this is like a baby step in that direction. And that your partner literally doesn't have to do anything. Just sit there and then maybe hug you afterwards.
And ask for what you need, right?
Yeah.
Like it would be meaningful if you don't try to solve this or step in or not say anything. Here's what I'm looking for as a response that lets me know you're being supportive.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you decide to like write this book? Were you just seeing this like over and over and over again? And you're like, there must be a book.
I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in suburbs of Philadelphia. And I moved out to San Diego about 18 and a half years ago. And as soon as I moved out here, I started taking classes in meditation and yoga and Reiki and personal transformation and, all of the Southern California woo-woo things I threw myself into, as we do here. And I was introduced to the concept of mindfulness for the first time in a meditation class. And I was like, whoa, what is this? And I was like, this is powerful. So I started reading on it. I started practicing it. And then I started integrating it into my work right away of being like, oh, this is pretty fundamental to, as women, like liking ourselves, let alone loving ourselves. And it's fundamental to being able to change any patterns that aren't working and being able to move through shame and embarrassment. So then it was 10 years ago, I gave my first TEDx talk. And I ended up doing it on this topic of specifically female sexuality and mindfulness, and talking through kind of the state of the affairs in the US around female sexuality, and then teaching some basic mindfulness and then sharing a client example. Yeah. And I got such a good response from that, from the audience, from men, from women, from people online, that within like a month or two, I was like, okay, there is definitely a book in this. And then I was like, I should be able to whip this out by the end of the year. And then it was like 6 years later that it was finally published.
You wanted it to be good. You wanted it to be everything it could be. You were mindfully putting it together.
Yeah. And then mindfully taking 9 months off from it at a time sometimes. But I knew, I got back to it. And then I was shopping for publishers and found a publisher that was a great fit for it. And then, and it's something I'm really proud of. And the feedback on it has been fantastic. I mean, it's definitely not a quick fix book. Like this is a lifetime journey type of stuff, but so many women, like, I've known women that have bought the book for themselves and then bought it for their 3 daughters in their 20s. They're like, oh my God, I don't want them to have to carry all the crap that I've carried. If they can learn these messages early and how to reframe things and how to truly feel empowered, not this kind of superficial version of empowerment that we have a lot of on social media today, but like this true depth of knowing yourself and having a voice that's truly based in mindfulness and compassion for yourself, but also compassion for others. Because I feel like the version of empowerment that's out there sometimes for women is really, I was going to say angry, and there's absolutely a place for anger as a tool to use. But I don't think it should be the default
because angry usually is, I need to set a boundary. And then I can soften into that boundary. I can have empathy for you not understanding or not agreeing or not loving it or not wanting to participate it. You do you, but I'm confident in who I am, and that can soften me as a person. I don't need to attack you with it.
Yeah, because anger is, like I said, and as a boundary setter and something like to protect ourselves or protect our loved ones for sure. Yeah. But if that's our default, that means we're actually not being vulnerable. We've hardened ourselves, and we're not, going to get to the heart of real intimacy and connections with other humans, regardless of whether they're a partner or not, just like kind of human to human. So, yeah.
So if I spend time sitting with what my sexuality looks like for me and what makes me feel good, I don't have to get defensive when my partner asks for something different or doesn't understand or doesn't like it. I can sit and tolerate their discomfort because that's not mine to deal with. It's a 24/7 job being mindful of how it already impacts me.
And yes, and we could be kind to our partners within that, to be like, hey, I get this. So this is what's going on for me. And this is my boundary. And this is what's right for me. And I honor, this isn't meeting your needs though. So I do want to stay in conversation about this. And how can we think outside the box? Yeah. Because I do think like, especially in long-term relationships, like boundaries are important, but like you're also always a team and there is compromise, but it's like, it's a fine line between doing something out of obligation or doing something that you actually feel resentful around and doing something as a gift and out of love for your partner. And that's a, real messy, sticky area to play in. But yeah, how you stated that earlier, I think is a really good place to start. Like I'm learning me, I know me, I accept me. I'm not triggered, by all my messiness that we all have, and my insecurities, and I could be responsible and talk through them. And then I give you the space to do the same, and then maybe we can move to some new idea or new place that we never even considered before. But right, you need that foundation.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily personal or an attack on you that your partner wants to experience their sexuality in a certain way.
Exactly. But it's hard.
Yeah,
because it's so
I'm saying it in like theory. I'm not saying it in like real life.
But it's perfect to say, right? But it's so hard for us to not take it personally because it feels so personal. And I think being able to make that separation is really powerful. Yeah, it's a great point.
So tell us about the podcast. Did the podcast exist before the book or after the book? How did the podcast happen?
A good question. When did that start? So my podcast is called Sex Talk with Clint and the Doc. And so Clint August is a local on-air radio personality here in San Diego. He's been on air for over 20 years on different radio stations. Apparently he used to do crazy stunts, like early when he was on the radio. Like,
was he on 91X?
He might have been.
Because I think I know him from that. My ex-husband worked at 91X, and I think I know Clint from 91X.
Because he used to like wear like G-strings and ride on a motorcycle and like do crazy shit, and like people just they dare him to things. He'd be like, okay, I'll do it on air. I was like,
he's a shock jock. I get it. Yes,
totally was. Which is funny now because now he's like 51 or 52. He's got 2 teenage boys. He's married. So anyway, he was for a few years he was on San Diego Living, morning radio or morning television here in San Diego. And I was a regular guest of his every month. And we became friends and we had such good rapport. And then that went off the air. And then he's through iHeart Radio and iHeart Media. And they wanted their on-air personalities to start podcasts. And he immediately reached out to me and was like, do you want to do a podcast? So that was 3.5 years ago. So that was before my book came out. And we've been doing it almost every week. We're at 175 episodes. And
fantastic.
I know. And we don't interview folks. We just talk. We both bring topics. We share very personal stuff. My parents used to listen early on. They're back in Pennsylvania. And then I was like, at one point I was like, you might want to stop listening to this podcast. I was like, because I'm like talking about going to sex parties and like BDSM stuff. I was like, y'all, no, I think maybe you don't need to listen anymore. So, I'm
grateful that there's a podcast that has those topics. I mean, that's part of the reason that I wanted to start this podcast. We have to have the conversation. If it's not for you, fine, but you don't get to judge. You don't get to have an opinion. It's not your sex life, but maybe try to educate yourself before you have an opinion.
Yeah. And just normalize talking about these things. Yeah. And I think for me too, like I'm coming in as a PhD professional expert in this field. And I'm like, I'm talking about personal stuff. And then Clint's talking about his shame growing up and raised Catholic and the first time he masturbated and the heavy shame he had around that. So, our main thing is just to make people feel comfortable around these topics. He'll come with his friends will submit questions to him and I'll get emailed questions. And then I just, field them and give people advice. And then it's great when we get emails back and they're like, oh my God, that was exactly what I needed to hear. So anyway, so it's fun.
I love that you're getting validation for your vulnerability too. Thank you.
Yes, that's very helpful. Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome. So I just talked about the title of your book and your podcast.
Okay.
How else can people find you?
My main hub is my Dr. Jenn's Den website. It's drjennsden.com. Honestly, if folks go to Google and just type in any version of spelling Dr. Jenn's Den, they'll find my stuff. And that's my hub. Yeah. So my book, my podcast, literally 15 years of blogs and interviews and videos, all sorts of material on there. And I, as a sociologist, I like to try to keep up with some social commentary also of stuff that's going on in society and offering my views on that and kind of deconstruction of topics like that. So yeah, and please follow me on social media. If you like my approach to stuff, if you're in San Diego, reach out and say hi. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to meet you, neighbor. And I'm just as delighted as I thought it would be. You're so easy to talk to and you have a very infectious enthusiasm. So
I appreciate your questions.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Dana.
This has been the D-Spot Podcast with Dr. Dana McNeil. To learn more about Dr. Dana's practice, simply visit us at www.danamcneil.com.